Hello, welcome back to the third episode of the Retail Innovation Podcast. And I'm joined by my co-hosts Ralph and Rob.
Hello.
Hey, Greg, great to be back.
Right, so let's get straight into it. It's been about, I think, 6 weeks since our last episode, so a lot of time has passed. And as you know, in technology, a lot happens in 6 weeks. So just before we go into a kind of summer vacation season, let's just cover kind of what the articles that have caught our eye over the last 6 weeks or so. I'm going to start with Google and these AI overviews that you've probably been noticing on your Google searches now. So a lot of the searches that you run now are giving you AI overviews from Gemini. What we've got is a European court a court in Germany, in Munich, has ruled that Google can be held responsible for false claims in its AI overviews. This is after two publishers said that the feature linked them to scams and disreputable practices. So the court treated the AI-generated summary as Google's own statement rather than a simple link to a third party, a legal distinction which has major implications for any brand or retailer whose reputation depends on what AI answers say about it. And so Google is now appealing, but this does set a precedent. Any thoughts, Rob? You've had a look into this.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Look, I mean, if a company's making any kind of statements, then it has to be, and they've pulled together that information, which is effectively what Google has done to give a summary, and then they need to be able to stand behind it, right? We had the Air Canada case maybe 6-12 months ago now, where an AI agent refunded a flight he shouldn't have. And the court said that, yes, Air Canada, that's your problem. You can't say it's the AI agent's fault and not take responsibility for your own agent. And I think this is just a continuation of that kind of thought process. And it makes sense to me. I'm not entirely sure what Google's trying to accomplish by appealing, because it is their stuff that's doing it. I think overall, you've got to own your own output, right? And I think most brands would logically go along with that, right? I think it makes sense.
Okay, on to our next one, which our next topic actually involves Google as well. So this is in the same topic of AI summaries. You have started noticing them underneath the search ads, so it's a placement thing. So Google is now showing those AI generated summaries somewhere between some search ads and a disclaimer that AI can make mistakes. So you've got your ads coming from retailers and brands, and then you've got an AI summary with a disclaimer saying AI can make mistakes. And what it hasn't said is whether advertisers get any control over the content or how it's selected. But you're starting to see these AI generated summaries directly under the search ads.
Yeah, I think it's the gradual move, right? They know that no one would accept AI summaries just being the standard way of doing search overnight, right? So they've gradually been introducing them, and now they're appearing under shopping, and soon they'll have some kind of sponsored prompts or sponsored answers, or it's a steady change to get people used to it. And if you've seen any of the latest Gemini advertising, it actually has a really simple message, which is that you don't have to just type 2 or 3 words anymore. You can type entire sentences. And these kind of ads are being shown at the cinema and that kind of thing, and that's all they say. They're not trying to be fancy. So Google are recognizing that you've got to move a whole population slowly, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense to me. But I think for a lot of retailers out there, it might be catching them faster than they expected. It's still a much faster pace of innovation than, say, mobile or web generally, or whatever you want to talk about before.
And I saw at Vivant, who are a big kind of marketing agency, commerce agency in London, they do a show called Pulse. I was at it a few months ago, and what they said, they shared their data, and they said, I think it's about 60 merchants included in this sample set, that their Google ad spend has gone up. So actually, even though everyone's been talking about cannibalization of their own revenue, well, you as an advertiser, as a retailer or a brand who wants to advertise on Google, you're spending more money. And that's partly, we've seen this trend over the last few years where cost of acquisition is going up generally, because it's really hard to get heard in this kind of sea of digital noise that is now created through social and LLMs and search engines, etc.
But I think here's a big opportunity because Google actually is now able to create interactive and dynamic responses to your search. So Some of the responses you'll actually see you can interact with sliders, for example. And any moment now, I can absolutely see Google asking advertisers if they would like them to generate a personalized advert for the person that is searching. And that could really, extend to audio, to video, to presentations, content that is completely personalized to the search context of the user. And I think that, is going to change the game considerably. So not only have you got the actual search response, but you've now got the full power of the generative capability of Google that is also very much aware of how your brand wants to be portrayed, because it's got this the advertising profile, the business profile, and I think this is where it's going to get really interesting, because the number of services that you could potentially have it generate as part of a search is just, it's way beyond just returning a search result. And I think this is where the agentic, let's say, search information also starts to come into play. So one of the things we know is, the LLMs really like to see comparative data. They like to see, how does your brand or how does this particular product compare to other leaders in the market? And so I think the ability for it to kind of put complex graphs and just, I guess, material that is designed to show you how it fits into your life, into your context, but also how it compares to brands that really matter to you. I think this is where it's going to end up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like Rob said earlier, you're getting the slow drip feeding of AI features into the traditional Google search, and they're taking it. Whilst that was moving at 100 miles an hour, you've still got a very large user base, the world of consumers who won't be able to take to the change as quickly as perhaps the tech companies. So we see the same in business, right? It's like AI. You look at, in our day jobs, right? Every day we're playing with AI and we're thinking, why has business not caught up? And I think it's just because there's a population of people out there who have to get used to things, and it takes a bit more time than just a drop of a new frontier model. On the same topic of models, I don't know about you guys, but I've been playing with Meta AI for about 6 months now for image generation. I actually used it at the weekend for a LinkedIn post that I did. Of, if you've seen Agent Smith, I generated a version of me for. There was a kind of a bit of a piss take of. Well, it was the Matrix, Agent Smith in the Matrix, but I'm dressed like Agent Smith in the Matrix with the shades on. I looked the part, definitely, but it was generated by Meta.ai, because when I tried other models, they all told me you can't do that. You can't edit that person, thinking I'm some kind of celebrity or something to do with maybe copyright infringement related to the movie. So anyway, I've been playing with this for a while, and they've now launched it officially. So it's called Muse. Meta launches the news story is Muse has been launched by Meta, but it's kind of been around for a while in kind of beta, and I don't know why it was on some kind of trial or beta product, but it's certainly been a very powerful image generation and video generation tool that I've used for 6 months. So that's rolled out. Given what we know about Meta's businesses, and they're an advertising business like Google, I'm just speculating what are Meta up to. They've been a bit slow off the blocks on AI, people perceive, but they've been working quietly in the background. You can embed some of these, so when you create these AI generated images or videos, you can flick them straight to Meta channels like Facebook and Instagram. But have you guys got any thoughts about what they're up to and their business model of the future?
Yeah, I think one of the things they've gathered quite a lot of praise for in the past few months is their targeting, their audience targeting. So you've stopped kind of telling it who to target specifically, right? Deliberately, if you like. As in giving them kind of very specific segments and groups and ages to go after. You can just describe your product and what it's good for, and then it will find the most relevant people for you. That's what their audience matching does, and apparently it's pretty effective, and it's getting more effective. So instead of the old days where you would bid on a keyword or something in Google, you're increasingly relying on AI to do the targeting, and this is just the next step. Like Ralph said earlier about Google, once you've done the targeting that way, well, why wouldn't you also serve the message that way? And Google's been doing a bit of that recently. It will create your ads for you out of a kind of kit of parts, if you like. And so you can easily see kind of Meta doing the same. And the only other thing I'd throw into that is, I don't know whether you saw it last week. I think it was last week, might have been the week before. On WhatsApp, you were invited to pick your username, right? And if you're already using a username on Instagram, you already had an Instagram handle, you could use that one on WhatsApp, and it would connect the things together. And for me, that was not just a bit of fun or a land grab for
Ah,
names. It was very much a universal profile approach, right? They're finally folding WhatsApp into Meta, into Instagram, well, into Instagram and Facebook, basically, so that you can, you know, they said for a long time, no, WhatsApp will stay separate. It's still private. It's still this. It's still that. But it was inevitable. It was going to go down this route, and the username thing is just the first step, I think. So I
I
think
haven't
those
looked.
are related.
Yeah, because I've noticed that when I post to Instagram, it's also posting to Facebook if I allow it to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the numbers are for Facebook decline, but I'm sure Facebook has been declined for some years relative to the other social media networks in terms of growth. But I'm seeing that kind of cross pollination between Instagram and Facebook. I hadn't clocked it. That's probably pretty obvious actually what you just said now in hindsight. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that. But any thoughts on that, Ralph?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've kind of been thinking about what Meta are planning for retail for quite some time, but I think the fact that they have released Muse more recently is because they've actually released a paid for version, so you can now subscribe to it. So before they were giving it away, now they're actually letting you pay for it, which is an interesting concept in itself. And so I think one of the reasons why we've seen the image generation is because so many of their platforms are so heavy in terms of that content creation. So the very short videos, everybody else. So Sora has died a death from ChatGPT. You're not creating videos there anymore. But I think Meta's platforms are still, very much indexed towards image sharing and short video sharing. And so I think partly, it's about producing content, but I'm really interested to see what it actually means from a retail point of view. And I think Instagram is definitely one of the leaders there. So between Pinterest, Instagram, you've, I think, got a lot of evolution in the shopping space because they're just starting to take away the friction of buying products through both of those platforms. And I think, Meta has got a real advantage with all of its consumer data that it's able to leverage from what people are looking at in terms of Facebook and Instagram. And I think it makes complete sense for them to just start to bring this cross-platform, retail opportunity together, because ultimately that's what it's all about. Can they really rely on ad revenue in the future? I don't know, but they're obviously their whole kind of foray into the multiverse hasn't really delivered the goods. You might say that their foray into AI hasn't delivered the goods. They've had huge success with the Meta glasses, and obviously that's in partnership with Ray-Bans and Oakleys, and I think that is been a very interesting kind of foray into AI, and probably the only area where they've really been leading, other than obviously their ad platform, which I think it's still their main money driver. But I think they've got some interesting things in play. They just haven't really been at the table when it kind of comes to the core LLM capability. But with this latest Muse offering, they've actually jumped into the number two space on some of the benchmarks, and I think that's interesting, given they've now got a paid for model. But exactly how that's going to be used, I mean, we'll just have to see. They seem to be chasing image and video generation when others have kind of said no, thank you. Anthropic hasn't even really, it doesn't even play in the image generation and the video space. Everybody's kind of left that now to some degree in terms of video for the Chinese models and for Google.
Well,
But
I think that's an important point, Ralph, isn't it? Anthropic, like they're starting to very much differentiate what users they want. Anthropic's going after that enterprise developer, all that community. Meta's building it for its own ad users. So you're starting to see they're using the right thing for the right area instead of just general models all the time, which I like. You're starting to see a bit of sophistication coming in.
Yeah. So everyone's thinking about where we go with personalization. It's certainly, I mean, Rob, we talk about personalization almost daily in our day jobs. Think about kind of commerce, but when I used to work for a content management platform called Ampliance, and we were going to be the content factory, produce lots of content, and then you could give that content to a personalization engine, and it would personalize based on all the different audience types that you would get. So, but what we realized is you needed a CMS to create the volume of content that you needed. In reality, it never really that never really came to light because you could increase the content by maybe 5x with an efficient CMS. But in reality, when you're talking about micro segments here of people, you need to create way more content than that. So, three or 4 years ago now, we have language models, and you can create not just language models, but AI generated video, etc. So you could now create millions and millions of versions of the same kind of campaign in different formats for different people. Maybe you're not even doing campaigns anymore. I don't know, but you're matching products with people, right? And then to match products with people, you've got to know the best way you do that is you personalize. So that means creative content, and that creative content we are speculating will be generated on the fly. So yeah, what's the future of a CMS? The CMS is probably going to generate content for you. Anyway,
Well,
that's
yeah, and it also needs to hold all the component parts as well, all the kind of language style, all that potentially, right? All the assets, the actual assets that you really like. Because I was talking to a CTO last week, and your comment, Craig, reminded me of the conversation, which was basically, I he said, I never want to hear the word segment or segmentation again, because he
yes.
was just like, that's old school. It's done, right? We should be going for personalization at scale, one-to-one personalization at scale, and we should never even think about a segment of users, because there was never such thing anyway. It was just a convenient way for a technology to target a little bit better than it did before. But really, we're all individual humans with very different profiles and feelings. I am not your standard average middle-aged man, because there is no such thing, right? Well, maybe there are some stereotypes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So I mean, when you used to walk into your store, when the shopkeeper knew who you were, you would get a very personalized experience, right? And it's the same. I think it's the same thing. Is that what AI gives you the ability as a retailer to do is be super relevant to the person you're talking to, and you can do that at scale without humans, right? So we're seeing chatbots and shopper agents, etc., and we're seeing these being very successful in e-commerce, and and we're also seeing experiments in marketing where you're generating many versions of the same, essentially the same campaign. But like you say, will it be campaigns anymore? Or will it just be one-to-one dynamically generated personalization that looks at the products available in the warehouse and matches them to the person? But yeah, lots. It affects the advertising world. It affects the merchants. It's going to be a very interesting few years for sure. On the same subject as social, this is just one merchant here. Milani have said that they've had 18 straight quarters of growth, and they're crediting TikTok Shop for that. So this is probably driven by the press machine at the PR machine at TikTok Shop. But they are, we know that TikTok Shop is the growth of TikTok Shop is staggering right now. What's the current number? I've got some data here around the explosive growth of TikTok Shop. So let me read some of that to you. So projections estimate that the global gross merchandise value, and that's revenue without deducting returns, is $112 billion by the end of this year. So that's how big it is. So it's the fastest growing retailer. They got to 10 billion US GMV in 18 months. So you can see the trajectory of TikTok Shop. What's interesting is that no other social media company before them had cracked this, and now we've got TikTok Shop where when teenagers like my two teenagers are transacting in their bedrooms for things they see on social media without having to go to the site. And I guess it's a sign of the times, but it's just further disintermediation of the brand, but driven by the a lot of the influencer community as almost brand ambassadors.
Yeah, I think they cracked a couple of things, right? From my perspective, one is the lack of friction in the process, right? So as you say, you buy on the platform, and it's relatively straightforward. The growth rate is phenomenal though, compared to any other kind of commerce player out there. I think if you add them up, aren't they the third biggest commerce player now, individual commerce player in the US? After, like, I'm sure it's something like Amazon, Walmart, TikTok Shop. And I think it's something like that. I'd have to verify that.
It will be on that number,
Yeah,
the
yeah. It's
number I've just given you. Yeah,
unsubstantiated from my part, but I'm sure it's
yeah,
pretty much up there.
yeah, yeah,
But the thing I've heard the most about why it's worked comes back to a little bit like Meta's targeting, is that it is scarily accurate how much it knows you because of how much you've kind of flicked through and what you have tapped, what you haven't tapped, what you have waited on, listened to, all of that kind of stuff. It's built up some kind of phenomenal profile of most users. And so when it suggests a product, at least anecdotally, according to the people that I speak to, it's scary accurate. Most of the time, that product is like, yeah, I would
yeah.
like that. And so
But if you
it's
think about the
encouraging.
amount of products and the amount of influencers on
Yeah,
TikTok, you're going to have
yeah.
to be pretty good at targeting. Otherwise, you're just going to not never hit the mark. And
But I think it's phenomenal.
it's almost ridiculous that I go to a website today for a retailer, and I'm not going to name this because this is a customer of mine, but I get women's dresses when I go to this website, and it's logged in as me, and I just
Mm,
these guys are in trouble unless they act fast. I mean, I
mm,
honestly, this is a department store. All right, onto the next topic. It's more. This is onto the kind of the transaction part of it. So we've got Square who've launched their agentic commerce integration with ChatGPT and Claude. So they're not the first. We know that Stripe were kind of there quite early, but now you've got Square who are also doing it. So it's more of the same. Yeah, it's just, I guess, another sign of the times. We're getting again, back to the disintermediation topic. You're getting LLMs and social media platforms have more of the conversation with the consumer, which means the retailer or brand is not getting the data they once got, and that's now being being owned by the LLMs and the social platforms in these cases. So the transactional element is interesting. So Square and Stripe are basically seen as being direct challenges to the likes of DoorDash and Uber Eats, and they're using agentic commerce to kind of to challenge those what you'd consider quite high fee aggregators. So, any thoughts on this one, Ralph? Do you have DoorDash or Uber Eats in Ibiza?
No, we have none of those things. You take your fishing rod down to the pier and you go and catch it if you want something fast like that. Actually, we do have the pink ladies who drive around on scooters and they will go and deliver stuff for you. So nothing quite as scaled as DoorDash or Uber Eats. But I think you raised something really interesting here. And we're really in a race for the kind of platform, but I think ultimately what this is going to be defined by is consumer trust. So there was a recent YouGov assessment. They did a survey amongst 2,080 adults, and they said, okay, would you trust agentic commerce? So an agent basically transacting on your behalf. And most people said no, because they don't trust AI. And I think this is ultimately the thing to overcome. But if we just have a look at how we've got to where we've got to, so OpenAI obviously initiated their instant checkout, and it really stumbled. This was some months back now already,
Yeah,
and what they found was it converted roughly 3 times worse than a retailer's own website. So that was a bit of a learning, which is why you haven't heard a huge amount of this since the original launch. But since then, obviously, we had Rufus from Amazon, and they've now renamed that Alexa for shopping, which I think is kind of interesting. And Walmart are pushing Sparky, which is their assistant. And then you've got Google and Shopify, and they're basically pushing for this universal commerce protocol, which is actually backed by Visa and MasterCard and some of the really big players. So we've got a lot of people that are trying to solve for this agentic kind of participation in the purchasing. But I think, the reason why TikTok somehow have landed it is because people really trust those influencers. They've built relationships with those folks. And so although they might not trust TikTok, they definitely trust the influencers that are peddling these goods. And I think this is potentially why, as a platform, that's really winning. Didn't start as a retail platform; it started as a content platform. But the reason why it works is because there's trust. And so now, of course, we are basically seeing the rise of the infrastructure that is also trying to create agent to agent retail. So this is essentially when you've sent your agent out to go and book your next family holiday, and you've given it a bit of spend, you've loaded your credit card, and you've said, as long as you find something in somewhere that's guaranteed over 28 degrees and not more than 35, and for this price, and the kids eat free, then you can go away and book it. And so that is what everybody's working on. And of course, we're basically now all trying to find something that we trust and an ecosystem that we're prepared to invest in. So I don't know. I think we have a long way to run to actually see which main system will win out. This is very much like the early stages of credit card clearing. We only have a handful of companies that have actually managed to maintain control, and you've got the likes of Visa and MasterCard, with most of the world's clearing going through that. But of course, Stripe has come in and made some good business there as well. So by no means is this a kind of a one vendor race.
No, I think it's really interesting because if I also throw Adyen into the mix, Craig, because yes, Square's trying to get involved, but I don't know whether you heard more about Adyen Agentic
I have,
recently.
yes.
But right, so they entered the space, and they, traditionally what are they? They're a payment processor and fraud kind of provider, but then through their Adyen Agentic stuff that they're proposing now, they're also trying to have a catalog feed and an inventory feed, and they also will create a cart, and they're trying to act as a universal translator between all the chat engines, OpenAI, Google, Gemini, all that kind of stuff, and all the retailers, payment providers. They're trying to be the central hub of all of that, right? And that's a fascinating strategy. That is a big step from where they are, but also quite a natural step as well, if you like. But it just feeds into what you're saying here, that we've got all this disruption of people suddenly trying to run to the payment rails effectively, or somewhere around the payment catalog cart checkout rails, or that whole thing, and try and own it, or own a big chunk of it. And Visa and MasterCard aren't immune to this. They're also doing their own thing, right? And if you extend that even further, you've got some banks that, in financial services, some of the newer banks are trying to get around traditional payment rails, like interbank transfers are much cheaper for them. And so they're trying to use different infrastructure to even send money around. So I think it's fascinating time. It'd be interesting to see who wins out and who doesn't.
All up for grabs. Yeah. So this next topic, Ralph might not be able to relate to because it involves convenience retail, super convenience. But given in Ibiza you have to go and catch the fish for dinner, you might not relate to this topic as much. But you are in London quite a lot, so you probably do use these services. But Steve Dennis is a great writer. He's written a few books on retail. I've read both of them, or listened to them on Audible. He said he's been very critical of over-indexing on pure convenience. What we mean by convenience isn't just co-op convenience store or Tesco local or whatever. This is about the concept of over-indexing on frictionless shopping, which eliminates the part of shopping which some of us love, which is the discovery and the human interaction. So he says that convenience is for people that things don't care about, and they'll gladly endure the kind of waiting in lines for things they love. So yeah, we're going to do convenience for stuff frankly we don't care about. Like, I don't know, for me it's dishwasher tablets that come every 3 months. But we like friction. We don't mind friction when we're waiting in lines for brands we love. So for example, whenever there's a new launch of the iPhone, I see the queues outside the Regent Street store, the Apple store in Regent Street, because these guys they're quite happy to spend 3 hours, and some of them camp actually outside the flagship store in London for the latest product because they absolutely love the brand. So it's a nice story, this one, or a nice observation by Steve, because we were getting worried about shopping there, but what we do know is that there's plenty of people still shopping in major cities and out of town shopping malls, and there's part of shopping that is not going to go away. There's the physical shopping. So yeah. It's one thing he does say is it's the collapse of the unremarkable middle. So being good enough or moderately convenient is no longer a viable strategy because consumers now have infinite choice, pricing transparency, etc. And so average retailers are just going to become a bit obsolete. And so you're going to have the convenience ones that just have to do it really, really well, and then you're going to have the more the full kind of end-to-end shopping experience with the brands that you love. So, any thoughts on that one, Rob? You live near a major city, so you probably have
Ish.
convenience
Yeah.
in your life today.
Yeah, I think I do. I certainly do have convenience and things coming fast if I want them to. I think it's right. I think this idea from Steve of convenience being quite boring is true, and it's interesting how that relates to the agentic stuff and the agentic shopping thing, because that's the use cases that people naturally gravitate towards, right? But it's not really necessarily where the money's being spent. And so well, it is, but it's not the exciting part or the really high value purchases or high margin purchases, or you know what I mean. It's the realm of grocery and everyday essentials, which is not super convenient. So a lot of these use cases where it's like, oh, it will magically detect that you're running out of this and it'll order that. It's kind of like, that's not actually exciting to me, right? And I expect and hope that will be taken care of in the future. But is it a place of differentiation? No, quite the opposite, actually. I think it's a place where the brand could disappear unless it becomes unreliable in its delivery. I mean, I'll give you another example. Amazon have tried many times to do grocery, haven't they? And they've got Amazon Fresh. They've got, in the UK, they had a tie up with Morrison's and various others. And, it's always been a little bit of a struggle for them. But apparently in the US now, they've started suggesting grocery things when you're about to finish an Amazon order. So if you're like my household, we order something from Amazon probably 2 to 3 times a week. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, it's a statement and it's true. And lots of people are like that. So I'm getting very regular Amazon deliveries. And in the US now, you can add convenience products, just one click add. You can add some milk, add some bread, add some kind of whatever you want to that Amazon order you're about to check out. And suddenly that's a different ballgame, isn't it? I'm already there. The friction's incredibly low. If they start suggesting some of the right products, that could be really interesting from an Amazon point of view. But from a convenience point of view, it doesn't excite me that much. So how do we move away from that? And if you're a retailer that isn't that, you've still got a lot of space to create experience, haven't you? That's what Steve's saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's really right. I think we're going to see a continual consolidation of convenience, and a lot of customers just won't really care about that consolidation as long as the stuff keeps coming and it's reliable. But on the other end of the spectrum, we'll hopefully enjoy the other part of shopping and travel and experiences even more and want more differentiation.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's the thing. I was just going to say,
sorry.
It's all about dopamine, So the best brands give you the dopamine hit before you have even gone shopping. You actually get this benefit, a kind of a chemical dump, when you just think about the experience. And I think, this is what friction creates, because when you've got everything on auto subscription, you never think about it. There's no real dopamine. So you're not actually getting the joy of the experience. People like to shop because just the thought of it, the anticipation of it, is where you get that hit. And the best brands know that, and they cultivate. This is, why Coke does what Coke does. Coke is always promoting experiences because they know just the act of thinking about drinking that Coca-Cola is literally going to, have people experience what it's like drinking it. And then they're more likely to go and find it. And I've actually visited a bunch of stores for clients in London over the last couple of weeks. And I have to say, I really see that the best retailers are putting an awful lot of time into training staff so that staff can actually introduce you to features of these products that you never knew existed. And, for example, I don't know if you've noticed on running shoes, but there's an extra set of the holes where your laces can go through. And one of the things that does is it locks your heel down. So when you put the flugel binder through it and you lace up along those two extra ones, it completely changes the characteristics of how the shoe behaves. And of course, when you're just walking around town, you want a little bit more of that give. But when you're running, you want that heel locked in. All right, unless somebody actually explains that to you, you don't even know what a flugel binder is, and you also don't know what those two additional holes are for your laces. And I think I had this experience buying a pair of Lululemon pants, some trousers basically, where the guy said to me, "Look, we've got this gusset that we've engineered in here. And if you look at it, it makes for a much more comfortable pair of trousers, especially when you are going traveling." So I took that pair of trousers. It's not a pair of trousers I would have looked at twice, but I put it on and I was, was completely converted. I really understood why that pair of trousers was invented and the way that it was constructed. But I needed the friction of standing there in front of the wall going, "I'm overwhelmed. What's going on here? I'm just going to leave." And somebody, an educated, store assistant came and said to me, "Look, let me explain what's going on." And I converted probably 3 times more than what I would have spent. In fact, I'd walked out of the store once already with nothing. And so I think retail as a place, where you can go and have an experience, but also where you've got educated staff that can really understand your needs and expand your thinking about product. I mean, we're talking about a pair of trousers. This is not a technical, complicated item, but I was blown away by the stuff that I didn't know, in addition to the properties of the four-way stretch combined with that gusset. And, the fact that I did get a bit of a discount, that sold me. And I bought 3 of those trousers, obviously slightly different styles and colors, but that's the way it works.
I think what if we boil it down, what we're basically saying is real time personalization. So you've bought stuff, you've got loads of data on from them historically. You've got data based on the behavior in the store or on the website there and then, and you're then suggesting the next thing before they walk out, before they leave the checkout. So it's a kind of an addition to the cart that you've already bought. So rather than just waiting 2 weeks and sending you an email, you're actually getting real time personalization in the moment, which is definitely a trend that we're seeing.
Right, and why aren't they following up? Why aren't they following up? How did that project go?
Yeah, it's coming. I think we're going to see a whole new world of post purchase and reactivation. This final topic is one that we definitely all live and breathe every day. It's about product data. Ralph, I know this has been your world for a very long time. One of the many things that you've been an expert in. So if you think about how people search for product, we've just been talking about this, contextual based search. I would like to go climbing in the mountains next week. This is where I'm going. This is what the weather, or you won't even tell it the weather because it will know the weather. Please make us recommend what I should take with me. Contextual search, we call it now, and you're doing it through, it's powered by AI. The biggest problem the retailers are having here is around the product data, actually, and there's a gap between how the retailer describes the product and how a real human actually searches for it in this new world. So you've got technologies like Lily AI. That's one of several that I've seen in this space. That is, they're calling themselves like a product intelligence platform, and they've just done a deal with Marks and Spencer. So what I mean, in essence, the way you describe products in the old days, or still today, I guess, and we're transitioning, is navy blue mid-length A-line might be the description you get from the supplier. You've then got to take that data. A human takes that data and then uses a product information management system, a PIM, to enrich it and make it suitable for keyword-based searches. But now we're able to use AI, and we can do things like search for a dressy top. Well, what does dressy top mean? Do I just search for the keywords dressy and the attributes, or some social media trend that I mean, what I understand about fashion social media trends is they happen every day. There's a new term for a trend. If I search that in a keyword search on M&S.com today, it would have no idea about what products would match that fast hitting social trend, because there's a big lag between the supplier descriptions coming in and the design, the traditional design brief and the keyword based search based product attributes to a language model that now should be able to understand exactly what the customer is looking for and then serve the products that are most relevant. So AI is being used in this space, and I think, Ralph, you've been looking at this for quite a while now. This kind of this kind of problem of product attribution and getting product descriptions in the right way for the old world, but now we've got product descriptions for the new world. We wouldn't even call them product descriptions; we'll call them product context, I guess.
Yeah, and I was talking to a head of digital just last week, and we were actually talking about how they can identify when products have an issue, and therefore maybe the content description isn't actually helping to recruit the right customers, and therefore they get a high degree of returns. So this is really a problem that every retailer faces, because when you don't match the need of the customer with the right product, you get a return, and that's obviously quite costly. And in the fashion world, up to 40% of product is returned.
Or
If you
you don't
could
get a
just,
sale, Ralph. You don't even find the product in the first
or
place
or
because
you don't even
you
get the
don't
sale, yeah,
find it because it's ignored your search.
right. And so I think here, it's really important to understand what customers are trying to do with the product and match it. And what we know with the advent of LLMs is that there are actually 38 additional elements that they're now looking for that actually allow you to match the right product with the right need. And it's much richer. And the way that they do that is they basically are obviously looking at Reddit comments. So this was over indexed. They're doing a lot less of it now. But in the early days, you had almost 50% of this kind of product recommendations coming from what people had said on Reddit. And if you didn't have Reddit posts and articles, then guess what? You didn't even come up in the search. But things like pricing, for example, LLMs want pricing to be consistent across the piece. If you have ambiguity in your pricing because you've got one catalog that says one price and another that says another, LLMs tend to not promote that product because they get confused. And that ambiguity is what is obviously driving hallucinations as well. And so I think structurally, we've just seen that we have to pull information together that explains the specific use cases, describes the product against all of its competitors, why this product and not the other product. And obviously through that, the AI can actually deduce much better what purpose a particular product is for, but also things like having product reviews. So one of the things I've been doing more recently for customers is I've been actually looking at what consumers are saying about their product out on the internet as basically a bit of a survey. And it's incredible, what you can get back. But of course, the LLMs are regularly looking at that data and actually looking at real life use cases that customers are saying this product works for and doesn't work for. And you can't necessarily take control over that, but you need to know what is out there and what is being said about your brand, because so much of that is being used by these recommendation engines. We don't just talk about SEO now, we talk about GEO, generative engine optimization. We also talk about AEO, answer engine optimization. So these are all kind of really terms that are modern day SEO, but they are really referring to these slightly different context based search that the LLMs are trying to match need with, potential products.
I would, yeah, I'd add a couple of things to that. I think you're completely right, Ralph, in what you're saying. And these models or frontier companies or Gemini, whatever you want to call them, have really got to try and balance out cost versus accuracy as well, right? So they're only as good as the trust in the recommendations they give, hence why they've used Reddit and all of that kind of stuff. And it's very costly to continually crawl and find and look at websites and digest that information and dig through the code, right? So a couple of things are happening. So one is that the amount they rely on catalog feeds is going up rapidly. So according to Profound, in June, these engines were now using 20% of their data sources. They're relying on catalogs as opposed to just crawling it off the product detail pages. Whereas in April, that was only 4%, right? So that's gone up rapidly because they're trying to reduce their costs and give brands a way to add their own stuff in there. That being said, there's also another technology the other way. If you haven't heard of WebMCP, there's appeared, which is an ability for web pages to now serve basically an agent version of any given page, stripping back all the code, everything, right? And it's like a grown-up JSON LD, if I'm being technical, right? Gives the agent the ability to ask questions, not just look at the data. through the MCP interface. So that's fascinating. That's two different ways of accomplishing the same thing. And I think that in itself is going to be a little technology war underneath that we need to keep an eye on. But the big headline for retailers there is that the reliance on the information you give is going up. So whether that's on the website or through a catalog feed. And most of them just haven't quite got there in terms of providing all that context and rich stuff. Right.
Off-site and on-site, it needs to be much more contextual. Well, we're at time. So we are at the hour, or at the end of this podcast anyway. If you like this episode, like and subscribe. We're available on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, and we have a website, retail-innovation.com. So yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and tell your friends. And we look forward to seeing you next time when we can tell you all about our summer holidays. I think we're all going on summer holidays. Is that right, Ralph? You're going away? Rob, you're going away?
I am, but why does Ralph need to go anywhere from Ibiza? I mean,
He's already on holiday.
I will be in London this week, and then I will come home for the weekend and feel like I'm on holiday with all of the rest of the Ravellas.
It's holiday every week for Ralph. But yeah, we will see you in August for our next episode, and that I hope you will be so excited by this episode that you'll tell your entire retail network, and we'll have a lot more followers for us in August. But thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye now.
Thank you.